The Senate approved on third and final reading the controversial Maharlika Investment Fund bill. This move comes just a week after President Marcos certified the measure as urgent.
Ladies and gentlemen, at 2:32 a.m. in the morning, we have 19 affirmative votes, 1 negative vote, 1 abstention. Senate Bill number 2020 is approved on third reading. Congratulations.
We would like to ensure that the pension funds and the aforementioned funds would not be touched, Your Honor, to at least preserve this, because we have had experiences in the past where the hard-earned money of our people were lost. So this is the amendment.
If this MIC is indeed created, then the BSP will for a long time, if not forever, be tied to it. Ang kita ng BSP sa Maharlika pupunta. Imagine, the BSP, which is a government agency mentioned in the Constitution, shall now be considered as working for the MIC.
Senators say they're fine-tuning the final provisions for the Maharlika Investment Fund hours after they had passed it. At this point, we do not have a complete picture yet of what this wealth fund actually looks like, and still no definite answers on the most important questions. Where will government get the money for it, and who will be managing the MIF? And what's in it for ordinary Filipinos? Let's talk about the Maharlika Investment Fund tonight on the Chiefs. Welcome to the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay at kasama po natin ngayon ulit dito sa Mandaluyong, Ed Lingao ng One News and Lucy Cruz Valdez, hepe po namin sa News 5. Chiefs, good evening.
Happy Wednesday, midweek. It's
Happy
a hump day.
National Development Fund.
Nagtrabaho sila kagabi, in fairness, ha?
It's a fun.
Hanggang alas 2 ng umaga. I mean, to make sure na hindi nyo na-miss yung detalyeng yun, ha?
And
2:30, 2:32.
Yun ang lead,
Yung tuloy, may tatlong senador na bigla nawala.
Ano kaya? Nakatulog na, sinadyang matulog.
O umiwas.
Hindi, pero
Hindi ko alam.
ano ibig sabihin na, ay gaya nga sinabi na sa intro, on the one hand, pinasa. Third reading na yun.
Yeah,
diba,
third
sa
reading
Senate.
yun.
Pero sinabi, we're fine-tuning. Ano exactly?
Well, I think what they really mean is BICAM. The BICAM
BICAM.
supposed to have started kaninang tanghali.
11.
Yeah. So, ang laki kasi ng kaibahan ng dalawa eh.
Sobra.
So,
Madami i-reconcile
And they're both certified as urgent. Both.
Hindi, pero ito naman ang good news, no? Absolute prohibition on the use of the pension funds. So at least on that, pareho yung bill, no?
Well,
Both the House version.
that's what we heard na...
That's what we heard, ha?
In-accept nila as an amendment. But I don't know, I haven't seen the ano eh.
Thanks to Senator Raffy too.
Oh, pero until we see the until we see the final BICAM report, it's all up in the air.
Pero in the meantime, ang isang malaki rin na pinag-uusapan dito yung sa BSP.
Yes.
Diba? Particularly yung dividends. 100% for the first 2 years, tapos 50% from there on. I'm not saying na naintindihan ko lahat yan, but alam ko, dyan ako marami ring tanong.
Ang naintindihan ko yung PAGCOR.
Oo.
Uy, nako, malaking ano yan, ha? I mean, malaking kawalan yan dun sa mga araw-araw ang pila sa PAGCOR para humingi ng social, anong tawag doon, funds, di ba?
Para sa mga
para
ospital,
sa mga
tulong,
hospital.
di ba?
Exactly. No?
Social Development Funds. So in keeping with that.
Ngayon, National Development Fund na. So medyo baka mawala yun or ma-threaten.
Because people are asking, di ba, paano ba natin i-communicate to? Anong implication? Ano yung benefits, potential benefits, pero ano yung potential risk? That's actually one of the things na marami nang humingi ng tulong sa PAGCOR. This may be something that you will be...
i-commit, di ba?
Mga ganun ang ano ng PAGCOR.
Malaki.
As well, the other thing that would need to be explained by our guests is may paghihimay kasi ngayon na hindi na siya sovereign wealth fund as originally envisioned in November.
Development Fund ng
Development
It's
Fund.
a National Development Fund. So anong kaibahan ng dalawa? I remember si Stephen Cunyeng was talking to us about that. Parang hindi klaro sa kanila kung ano gusto nilang gawin. Is it a development fund or a sovereign wealth fund? Those are two different things.
At kung saan ka man lumugar, the point is, sabihin nyo kung ano yan, Pagkatapos tsaka ko pa ilalabas lahat ng tanong ko. Anyway, ilalabas natin yung as many questions as we can. Coming up, we will get the insights of our guests, the actual experts on this, on the Maharlika Investment Fund. The Chiefs will be right back.
And welcome back to the Chiefs. With us tonight to talk about the Maharlika Investment Fund, Diwa Gurigundo, former Deputy Governor of the Bangko Sentral, and Michael Ricafort, Chief Economist of RCBC. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Dini, sirs.
Magandang gabi po.
Thank you very much. At magandang gabi sa ating lahat.
Magandang Maharlika. Doon muna tayo. Let me just ask you offhand your reactions, please, to the Senate version of the Maharlika Fund. Sir Gurigundo, kayo po muna.
Well, unang-una, ako ay nabigla sapagkat ay naasahan ko ay mas marami pa ang oras na ibibigay to talk about this very important proposed law or the bill on the Maharlika Investment Fund.
So minadali.
Earlier, you were talking about the difference between a wealth fund, a sovereign wealth fund, and a national investment fund. The difference is basically when you have a sovereign wealth fund, you have the assumption is that you have surplus funds, windfall profits from the sale of natural resources, for example, oil or petroleum, gas, even gold and diamonds.
Right.
Now, ngayon, itong ating pinag-uusapan ng Maharlika Investment Fund is now an investment fund, which means that we don't have surplus funds, we don't have windfall profits,
Right.
but we will be tapping the resources coming from the budget or coming from other government agencies. So this is going to be, to me, questions will be asked by the ordinary people. Questions will be asked by those in government or even those in the private sector.
But you seem to have implied in your earlier part of your answer, no, na parang minadali yata ito. And ngayon nga, nagbabaycam na as we speak, no? Do you think there's
Kasi
time
marami
to
ng mga
answer
issue.
the questions that are now
Yeah.
being raised by the fact that this is an investment fund and not anymore a wealth fund?
Correct. Well, maraming question, Lucy. For example, yung paggamit ng dividendo ng Bangko Sentral.
Correct.
Kanina sinabi ni Robbie yan, ano? Ang problema sa ganitong paggamit ng pera na ilagay na sa revised charter ng BSP kung saan gagamitin ang dividendo ng BSP, no? Because you see, the sole stockholder of BSP is the government. So the government will have to source the capitalization of the BSP, additional capitalization from the budget. Now, dahil sa walang masyadong salapi ang ating gobyerno, napagkasunduan, napagtibay ng ating kongreso, nakukunin na lang doon sa dividendo ng BSP yung ipang-re-recapitalize sa kanya from 50 billion since 1993 to 200 billion. Ang problema ngayon, now you have the Maharlika Investment Fund. So instead of the initial estimate that it would take 8 years to recapitalize the central bank fully to 200 billion out of its own dividends, it will now be extended to about 17 years. Now, anything can happen. No? Maaari magkaroon ng problema sa ating ekonomiya, magkaroon ng problema sa ating banking system. In both cases, you will need a strong BSP to be able to intervene, to keep prices stable, and to make sure that the banking system remains robust and stable
Yes.
over a longer period of time. That costs money.
Now, Mr. Ricafort, do you think that if handled well, if managed well, this fund can actually more than make up for the time of rehabilitation that will now be lost, the 8 years, because they're now going to be tapping into the dividends of the BSP? What do you think as a banker?
So yun po talaga yung motibasyon para kumbaga dapat mas mataas yung kikitain doon sa pondo na yon, no, kumpara doon sa mga traditional na investments, no? Kasi syempre maingat din naman dahil una kasi may mga respective mandates itong iba-ibang government financial institutions saka GOCCs.
Right.
So dapat talaga naka-reconcile yun, no? Kung lalo na kasama rin doon kung saan isang ilalaan yung kanilang mga pondo, no? Pati yung mga sino ba talaga yung paglilingkuran nila based sa mandato nila. So dapat reconcile po yun. At alam naman din po natin na ngayon may yung resources po limitado, no? Nga po katunayan may budget deficit na kailangan i-manage, no? On a yearly basis. So alam naman natin pagka may budget deficit humihiram po ang ating national government para pondohan po yun. No? Kaya talagang all the more na una, dapat reconcile po yung mga mandato ng mga respective GOCCs, GFIs, and other government institutions. Pati rin po yung at the same time, dapat yung hurdle rate na tinatawag. Mas mataas po talaga dapat yung kitain. No? So all the more na mataas po yung expectation dahil nga po na kasi kung titignan naman po natin mabuti, parang maaring may layunin din naman po kasi at mithiin. Dahil ngayon, even in the past, kumbaga kanya-kanya pong investments, no? Pag meron po silang mga halimbawa, yung mga nakokolekta nila sa mga miyembro, no? Yung mga contribution, no? Kumbaga depende kung ano yung nila, no? Yung mandate or charter nila, no? So, ini-invest po nila yon. Kanya-kanya pong kumbaga, mayroon po silang mga authorized na mga committees, na mga investment bodies. Pero ano po yun? Kasi kailangan po ngayon, parang maring, yun parang ginagawang mas unified. Dahil ang gobyerno naman po talaga, kung titignan natin mabuti, iisa lang po yan. Na parang may at some point may prerogative din po, no, kung gustong pag-isahin na lang, gawing collective, no, option po 'yun. Kaya nandoon po talaga yung proseso, yung exercise po sa batas. Yun sa pag-draft po ng bill na ito na nag-i-evolve pa rin po, no. At ngayon re-reconcile na po yung dalawang version, no. Kaya maaring may efficiencies, no, pero ganun po talaga dapat kumbaga, better off yung kung gagawing mas collective, mas unified, yung pag-manage yung mga pondong na ipon, no? From the, halimbawa, kung contribution po yan ng mga miyembro or allocation po yan or yung mga kinita po nila, naghahanap po ng mas mataas na return para ma-boost po yung capital at lalo pa pong mapaigting yung kanilang serbisyo under their respective mandates. So, ayun po yung kumbaga isi-set po yung mga alituntunin, no? Na when it comes to good governance, besides profitability, kumbaga may parang lumalabas the economies of scale na ina-establish kasi ang pag-manage po ng mga pondo, yung medyo nung kanya-kanya pa po yan, yung iba-iba pong ahensya, syempre may mga management fees involved, no? Lalo na kung itatap yung mga professional fund managers. So, yun po yung mga konsiderasyon. No? Kung indeed, merong efficiencies, may economies of scale, and at the same time, ma-achieve po yung objective na at the same time, yung prerogative din po, lalo na kung developmental in nature to finance, say, infrastructure projects. Kasi matagal na po na-propose yan for the past 10 or so years na kung mas mataas yung ma-offer na returns sa various infrastructure projects. So, isa pong konsiderasyon.
Mr. Gunigundo, and this is for Mr. Ricafort na rin. Ito nga, nasabi nga po natin, yung dividends, eventually, kailangan din natin pag-usapan yung budget dahil kailangan humugot sa budget, di ba? And as you said, isa lang naman ang single shareholder natin dyan sa BSP, it is the government, pero pagka pinag-usapan naman natin ng budget, Hindi na simpleng gobyerno pinag-uusapan dyan. Damay na kami dyan. Kasi we talk about budget, then we talk about, kagaya na banggit ni Mr. Ricafort, maybe kailangan tayong umutang para punuan yung budget. At same time, alam natin, pinupunuan din galing sa mga buwis namin. Ano po yung implikasyon nitong Maharlika Fund kung kailangan tayong humugot sa budget and there are provisions for that, ano po yung implikasyon nun down the line sa buwis namin?
Sa akin, ang returns is secondary. No? Yung pong sinasabi doon sa bagong version ng Senate bill na pinagtibay kaninang umaga, ang nakalagay dyan ay optimize, preserve the national wealth. Tapos creation of jobs, etc. Tama po yun. Wala po tayong pagtatalunan kung ang panag-uusapan natin ay mas mataas ang kinikita na pinagsama-samang pondo. But to me, because it is an investment fund that will be funded by public money, basically from the budget, and we are operating under a one single fund concept. Ang anumang mawawala doon po sa budget dahil ilalagay po ito sa Maharlika Investment Fund for the government to be able to achieve the targeted level of economic growth, yung pong tinatawag nating fiscal sustainability, dapat ay naipapababa ang ating deficit to GDP ratio, ang ating public debt to GDP ratio. Ang mangyayari po niyan dahil sa nabawasan ang ipang bibigay doon sa mga iba't ibang ahensya, sa iba't ibang infrastruktura dahil ilalagay ito sa Maharlika Investment Fund, the government will be forced to impose higher taxes or to borrow more. Or
Both.
Maaaring kombinasyon ng mas mataas na tax, mas mataas na borrowing. In which case, yan ang importante na maging dapat na i-resolve. The second point is this. Ito ang kakarampot natin budget. We have a very limited budget. And our problem is very urgent. You have poverty all around us. Infrastructure needs to be improved. Napakadaming mga dapat gawin sa edukasyon, sa ating mga health facilities. Ito ang dapat nating tinitingnan. Kesa sa tayo ngayon ay pupunta dito sa Maharlika Investment Fund na ito ay this is for investment purposes. Yan po yung aking nakikita. The trade-off is very important. Why do we have to invest at this point na yun nga doon sa certification ng bill? The global economy is riskier, it is more uncertain, and it is more volatile. Perhaps this is not the best time to do the investment. Okay? Sa ibang bansa, maging dito sa atin. Ang kailangan, ponduhan muna natin ang ating budget upang sa ganon ay matugunan natin ang mga kagyat na pangangailangan ng ating mga mamamayan. Importante po yun. And to me, that is the primary consideration why the Maharlika Investment Fund should be reconsidered.
Gentlemen, if you don't mind, a very, very, very basic question. Pasensya na, Bok. But ito, basic question lang talaga. Nung umpisa kasi, we had a long time trying to understand what a sovereign wealth fund was. Then eventually, with all the conversations, we got the idea, and I think we got it na, actually, itong pinag-uusapan, hindi na sovereign wealth fund to eh. Development fund na to. Now we're calling it an investment fund. Just a very basic question, very honest. When you say investment fund, iba pa po ba yan sa iniisip nyo when we usually say development fund?
Well, sa akin po, what's in the name eh. No? They can always call it an investment fund or a development fund. Pero by the very nature, doon po sa 1, 2, 3, 4 na gagawin ng Maharlika Investment Fund, I think it is more of an investment fund.
What's the difference?
Development fund yan, diretso yan sa mga project.
Okay.
Sir, kasi, well, in an interview kanina, you also pointed out nga na likely natataas yung mga buwis because of the rechanneling of all these funds to the Maharlika. But at the same time, I had the impression kasi, but here, please correct me if I'm wrong, I had the impression na the investment fund is precisely to pour money into projects that are critical. So hindi ba iikot lamang? Or did I get it wrong?
Siguro si Michael muna.
Opo,
Sige.
ayun po kasi yung common na katanungan kung paano yung magiging epekto nito sa ano natin, pananalapi natin, no? Lalo na sa budget deficit o sa utang, overall debt. Lumabas nga po yung huling data ngayon na nasa 13, a little over 13.9 trillion. As a percent of GDP, that's 61%. So, tama po yung sabi ni DG, ni Governor kanina. Kasi ito po yung isa sa priorities din ng ating bansa, yung fiscal management. Kasi galing po tayo sa pandemic. Marami pong hinaram yung ating bansa na parang, laki po talaga na yung year 2020, 2 trillion. That's equivalent to 10% ng ating economy. 2021, another 2 trillion. So, tapos itong last year, 2022, 1.7 trillion. Medyo nabawasan na po, pero malaki pa rin. Itong year to date, no, itong first 4 months, may 400 billion. So, subo total, may 6 trillion po yung na-incur na utang ng ating bansa. Nung pandemya lang. Out of the total debt stock na 13.9 trillion. So, yun po yung katanungan doon. Siyempre, kung eventually, kasi ano rin yan, actually, it's a matter of prioritization of the various infrastructure projects. Kaya, all the more na yung urgency, may fiscal discipline na tinatawag. Tax reform measures, yung intensified tax collection. Siyempre, it all starts there. Ito po yung fundamentals of financing po. No? Yung intensified collection, yung compliance po under the existing tax laws, pagbayad po ng tamang buwis, at kung kakailanganin po sometime in the future, dahil kasi at some point kailangan bayaran po yung mga hiniram na yan na may 6 trillion. Although long term naman po karamihan ng utang ng ating yung new taxes, so yan, yung mga pinopropose naman po, no, na marami po yun, pati rin yung higher tax rates. Pero kasi inflationary po yun. So maaaring hindi po muna napapanahon ngayon. Kailangan pagka medyo nag-stabilize na yung inflation na mandato po ng BSP, no, to stabilize prices. Yun po yung panahon na ito na po yung i-introduce na po yan. Pati yung fiscal reform measures, that's on the recurring income sources ng government. Ito pong tax collections, so structural tax reform measures, and pati ito naman po, yung on the expenditure side, yung sa spending, yan, nandiyan po yung right sizing of the government. Siyempre, disciplined spending, anti-leakage, anti-wastage, anti-corruption, so good governance. So, dapat, ayun, consistent po lahat yun, no? Kasi limitado po yung pondo, deficit spending. Yung mga infrastructure projects, so kung definitely, so all the more na dapat, na yung mga developmental projects, kung karamihan po doon, infrastructure projects na malalaki, titignan po mabuti yung cost-benefit analysis. Kasi pagka, dapat talaga prioritize yung maraming benepisyo kumpara sa cost. Kasi otherwise, lalaki po talaga yung utang. At yun po yung mga pwedeng ponduhan din ng na yan, yung proposal po, no? Yun po yung isa sa mga ipaprioritize. Kumbaga, sige po, kumbaga, collectively, yung mga investable funds ng iba-ibang ahensya, basta consistent sa mga charter, allowed po yun. No? Kasi when it comes to, legally speaking, pati rin po yung, syempre, kung developmental, it's a function of that, no? Yun
Yes,
po would
sir.
it lead to, eventually, kung tataas ba yung level of debt or yung utangin? So, yun, kasi parang mangyari po yan, yung funding po, it's either outright from the national government or through this fund na manggagaling to sa iba't ibang ahensya. Sa iba pang
Sir, let me
GOCC.
try to reframe it, sir. Let me try to reframe the question. Do we have good examples of other development funds in other countries, and how does our bill, as it is in the Senate now, compare to those other investment funds or development funds?
Well, karamihan ng sovereign wealth fund na ating makikita mula sa ibang bansa, yan ay itinayo mula sa windfall profits.
Yes, sir.
Out of sale of public assets. For example, properties. Yung iba ay mga windfall profits, surplus profits coming from the sale of mineral resources, oil, gas, gold, even diamonds. Yung iba, nanggagaling ito sa kanilang malusog na balance of payments. For example, it's Singapore, even Indonesia. No? Mula doon sa malalaking windfall profits mula doon sa kanilang pakikipagkalakalan sa ibang bansa, yun ay inilagay nila sa Sovereign Wealth Fund. Pero kahit na nakapaglagay sila doon sa Sovereign Wealth Fund out of windfall profits or sale of public assets, for example, last year, 2022, even Norway, okay, one of the biggest sovereign wealth funds, and even Indonesia and Singapore, they lost. Not because of mismanagement at this point, but because the economy, okay, the global economy, did not do well in 2022. In other words, yan ay isa sa mga dapat nating tinitingnan. Pangalawa, yung sinasabi tanong kanina ni Ed, na hindi ba umiikot lang tayo, pwede namang magano dito sa Sovereign Wealth Fund, dito sa MIF, total, yan ay gagastusin naman natin sa infra. That's precisely our point. Why create a Maharlika investment fund when you can very well pursue all of these projects within the framework of the national budget?
Yeah.
So you are creating another layer of government. You are creating another layer of expense. Why don't we just do a good fiscal management within the framework of the budget, mobilize all the existing government agencies, public works, transport, education, kasi kailangan ng education ng classrooms, school buildings, etc. Importante lang ang good governance, efficiency, and strategic management nung pong ating budget.
Sorry, ano ko lang yun, gusto kong sundutin. This is why I was asking, diba? That I get your point, what's in a name. At the end of it, do we just look at this as a development fund? So, but I guess, kaya ko tinatanong din yun is there an objective or a mandate here to the fund that is in fact different and separate and on top of the objectives, the development objectives of the national government and the national budget? For example, when we were talking about a sovereign wealth fund, we knew, ultimately this is para sa mga Pilipino, it's for our development and so on. But because it was a sovereign wealth fund, we also know part of its objective was in fact na para palaguhin niya yung sarili niya. When we call this an investment fund, does that suggest that on top of development, this also does have its own mandate to grow? And if not, and it is strictly a development fund, then that precisely goes to your point and our question. Then why do we need to create another layer and another route?
Well, Robbie, if you take a look at the approved Senate version, it says there, it is the policy of the state to generate, preserve, and grow national wealth, create jobs, promote trade and investments, foster technological transformation, strengthen connectivity, expand infrastructure, and achieve energy, water, and food security. This is being done by the government. This is being done by the different agencies of government. So the point is, why do we need a Maharlika investment fund?
Okay, it looks like you're saying that this is an extraneous activity right now, no? But of course, that's still open to question, and that we will discuss after the break. The Chiefs will be right back.
Thank you for staying with us. Now let's continue our conversation with former PSP Deputy Governor Diwa Gunuguddo and RCBC Chief Economist Michael Ricafort. Now, I mean, today we got news as well that the House of Representatives, the BICAM rather, has already accepted the Senate version of this. Just very quickly, kanina kasi we started off on the premise na there are things to reconcile. Now that it's clearer and in adapt, as the House actually did signal from the start. I mean, your thoughts on this development?
So essentially, we're now just talking about the Senate version, right?
Malinaw na ngayon
That's now
yung
what will be
pinag-uusapan
presented
natin.
to the President.
Do you get
Well, I
assurances
think
from
it
that?
was the House of Representatives that did the groundwork. Okay? Kasi nung simula, kung matatanda natin, ang tawag nila dyan, Sovereign Wealth Fund.
Yes, sir.
Right.
Pagkatapos, kasama dyan yung GSIS at saka SSS.
Correct.
Maraming issues, maraming mga debatable points doon po sa unang version ng House Bill. And because of that, medyo naayos until they were able to come up with that House Bill, which was transmitted to the Senate as a basis for the Senate bill. The first version introduced by Senator Mark Villar. So in other words, it was an evolving draft, and for all intents and purposes, the draft done by the Senate would more or less contain the current thinking of the House at that point and the subsequent discussions by the Senate. And there were some amendments that were incorporated into what came out to be the final version of the Senate bill.
One of which was the
correct.
absolute.
The House version would just simply accept the Senate version without question. Yeah.
Yes. Of course, one of the, what many taxpayers consider good news, no? One of the many amendments is the absolute prohibition to use SSS and GSIS funds,
And PhilHealth
pension
and OWA.
funds, no, as investment for the MIF. Do you think that it's really out of the question now? It's talagang hindi na yan gagalawin. And
No, kasi
that-
Luchi,
yeah.
no, doon sa Section 6, Article 2, no original version, ay nakalagay doon talagang under no circumstance will the GSIS and SSS be required or requested
Requested,
to
yes, sir.
contribute to the fund. But down the line, you will see
yes,
doon sa Section 12, Article 3, nakalagay doon, other GFIs and GOCCs, which would include the SSS and the GSIS,
Correct.
may invest provided their investment strategies, management strategies will allow, and two, their boards may approve. So in other words, sarado ang harapan pero sa backdoor open. Hindi pwedeng kuhanan pero pwede silang magbigay ng pondo doon sa Maharlika Investment Fund. Ngayon doon sa bagong version, talagang absolutely hindi pwedeng i-request, hindi pwedeng i-require at hindi rin pwedeng mag-invest.
okay.
So to me, I had some comfort in that particular
All right.
provision.
But essentially what you're saying there is, hindi pwedeng utusan, hindi pwedeng mag-request, but the boards of these GFIs and GOCCs, pwede silang magkusa na magsabi na, hindi,
Correct.
pero that aligns with our mandate. But then we also have to look at now at the not just the political structures of these leaderships, answering to the national government and to the president for that matter, but also the realities of politics in the Philippines.
No, are you
Kaya nga
saying
yung-
that na
that
pwedeng
was the
hingin?
original
Hindi,
version.
absolute, di ba?
Hindi pwedeng hingin.
Yeah.
Pero kung bigyan kita ng kusa,
Pwede ba yun?
Yun yung
absolute.
amendment eh.
Yeah, yun yung amendment.
Let me,
last night eh.
let me
Hindi na pwede, right?
clarify it. No? Let me
Oo.
clarify it.
Yeah.
In the original version,
Yes, sir.
ang nakalagay doon, hindi pwedeng kuhanan, hindi pwedeng i-request ang SSS at GSIS na mag-contribute dito.
In Section 6.
Pero six sections later, pinapayagan ng lumang version na mag-invest sila.
Yes, sir.
Basta't inaprubahan ng kanilang
Ng
board.
board.
Now, under the new, itong inaprubahan kaninang madaling araw, tinanggal yon.
okay.
Nakalagay
So
ngayon
talagang
doon,
wala na,
absolute
di ba?
prohibition.
There will be no
Hindi pwedeng
access,
hingan.
whether it's
Yes.
given or voluntarily given or whether it's
That's
asked.
right.
Wala na. So I guess
That's
that's a major improvement. And as a matter of fact, that was a real thorn in the beginning of the discussions at the House. No?
Pero sir, ako kasi mukhang foregone conclusion na pasado na to. I-ratify sigurado yan kasi nagkasundo na yung dalawang panig ng BICAM and you can be sure it's going to sail through na. So from the point of view of the public and from your point of view, what should we watch out for in terms of the implementation na of what will now be the Maharlika Investment Fund?
Michael, you want to get the first crack?
Yeah.
Kasi,
Thank you,
sir, it's a
Governor.
give. I think it's a foregone conclusion, I mean, mukhang
Yeah.
ganun
Yeah, it's really, number one is governance. Kasi this involves a lot of money. You're talking about billions of pesos of funds, no? So all the more na the responsibility fiscally increases, no? Considering that that the national government has to finance budget deficit, no, on a yearly basis, and the debt has to be managed, and kailangan pababain yung debt to GDP ratio natin. Kasi yun po yun po yung number one. Pati yung ano rin. Kasi syempre, iingatan din po yung investments pagdating sa kikitain, no? Sigurado po talaga na all the more na but it should be better off na collectively rather than yung watak-watak or individually yung bawat ahensya, no? Kung yun din yung mitiin, no? Na mas magkakaroon ng economies of scale, mas standardized, no? Kung titingnan natin talaga yung layunin nito, no? Kasi kesa naman isa lang naman yung gobyerno, pero syempre, although iba-ibang charter yan, pero kung papunta doon sa whole of government approach, pagdating sa mga priorities, sa mga prerogatives, kung ano ba yung pinpoint ng mga priority infrastructure projects na matagal na nasa blueprint, no? Sa iba-ibang yun kasi yung proposal din of in the past na yung ibang infrastructure projects kung maaring ipondo na lang ng iba-ibang mga ahensya, no? Na on the promise na syempre mas mataas yun nga, nandoon po yung hurdle rate, mas mataas dapat yung return kumpara doon sa traditional na pagkakakitaan nila ng mga safe investments, no? Mga government bonds, safest assets around locally and around the world. So, yun po talagang mataas po yung expectation, no? Kasi ano rin una yung kailangan talagang siguraduhin yung pagkita niyan, professionally run, no? Mataas yung level of governance at importante walang mawawala doon sa for any reason, no? Wala pong maano diyan when it comes to mahigpit po talaga, no? Wala pong hindi po madadivert basta-basta kung saan-saan lang, kundi talagang doon sa layunin na for developmental purposes, yung mga key infrastructure projects na pero yun po talaga yung konsiderasyon at motivasyon po doon, yung return na mas mataas. Yun po talaga kasi otherwise yun nga po yung at the onset yun na po yung binabanggit, otherwise parang ano na siya, no? That would really differentiate it, no? Rather than yung otherwise na-address na po ngayon yun, nagagawa na po yun ng iba-ibang ahensya, iba-ibang GOCC, ibang
Right.
GFIs.
Oo. Ano nga ba ang accountability ng mga mag-govern ng MIF na yan? Yun din ang gusto malaman ng mga tao. In case of the worst case scenario na malugi ang mga kung anumang investments ang gagawin nila, no? Ano pong accountability? Tsaka ano po mangyayari pagka nga nalugi? Anong consequence nun sa atin?
Lucia, no? Gusto ko lang sabihin yung nangyari sa 1MDB ng Malaysia. Okay? Nalugi sila dahil sa bad governance. What Michael was talking about should be good governance, efficiency, etc. Ang nagiging problema rito ay nagkaroon ng mismanagement and bad governance dun po sa 1MDB. And because of that, they amassed total loans of more than 7 billion at hindi may paliwanag yung another 4 billion. Okay? Ngayon, ang nahuli dyan ay ang dati nilang Prime Minister at nakulong. Dito sa dating version, walang kulong ang sino mang mapatunayan na nagkasala. Mabuti, doon sa bagong aprubahan na pagtibay na version, itinaas yung penalty kapag ka mayroong problema ang isa sa mga staff ng MIF at nagkaroon din ng provision dito para sa kulong. So in other words, may mga sanctions, no?
Right.
May mga sanctions. Number two, yung sinasabi nating mga safeguards. Yung safeguards dito, number one, is yung sinasabi nilang they will comply with the 25 Santiago Principles. yung Santiago Principles, ginawa po kasi ang principles na yan ng Sovereign Wealth Fund doon po sa Santiago, Chile. IMF was the leading institution here. But the problem here is, yung pong compliance with the 25 Santiago Principles is voluntary. And I hope, with good governance, they will comply with all the 25 Santiago Principles. Now, isang gusto ko lang i-flag, no? Dito po sa ating nakikita, yung pong mga uutangin ng MIF, wala pong garantiya ng gobyerno. There is no guarantee by the government.
Okay.
However, sa akin pong palagay, it remains contingent liabilities of the government. Dahil MIF is government.
Oo nga.
Ang pondo niyan ay galing sa gobyerno, galing sa iba't ibang ahensya ng gobyerno. Therefore, kapag yan ay nagkaroon ng irresponsible use of loan proceeds, the contingent liabilities of the national government will increase. Now, what about audit? Sa Commission on Audit, may provision po doon sa pinagtibay na panukalang batas, subject pa rin sila sa audit ng Commission on Audit. Pero every 5 years. Every 5 years. Now, sa annual audit nga ng Commission on Audit, may nakakalusot eh. Paano pa yung 5 years? So I hope, kung mapag-uusap pa rin sa bicameral, although mukhang inapprove na, dapat tingnan yan, yung sa Commission on Audit. Merong internal audit sila, may external audit, pero yung Commission on Audit na gobyerno, every 5 years yan. I think we should watch out for that.
Sir, apart from the audit, how transparent is this fund going to be for everybody? Not just COA, but civil society, private sector, anybody with the capability to look at this for whatever, even for forensic sake. Can I see this, for example, every time may dagdag na pera o merong gastusan? How transparent is this fund going to be set up?
Well, meron nakalagay dyan, Robbie, that they are subject to the freedom of information. No? The freedom of information. But I think the board may wish to observe a process of disclosing important and perhaps confidential information on investments and loans by the MIF. On the other hand, kung ito ay sinasabi natin kanina, gusto natin i-wholesale ito, i-consolidate, okay, so that we can maximize yung ating returns. Sa Kongreso, yung lahat ng mga project na poponduhan ng budget, iniisa-isa yan. Lalo na sa committee hearing o kaya doon sa hearing para doon sa budget ng isang government agencies like Public Works, Transportation, Education, iba pang mga ahensya ng gobyerno, nasasala yan. Pero dito, it will be the board of directors, it will be the management of MIF that will look and decide on which projects, which investment instruments to consider for possible funding.
Sir, may tanong ako doon sa kabilang banda niyan. No? Let's assume all our concerns are assuaged and let's set aside all of that for now. And let's assume even that there's some redundancy here, di ba? Parang all of these development efforts can just course through our usual government agencies and everything is simpler. But may advantage ba? Is there any potential advantage granting all good faith and granting the best wishes for this fund? Are there potential advantages to this fund given how, sa totoo lang, mabagal din naman ang budget. It's very hard for money to flow down to our communities and so on. We talk about red tape and so on. Are there potential benefits to this? Is this theoretically, for example, faster in moving money to where it's needed?
Certainly. Yeah.
Well, once the MIF realizes some returns, and it will take years. Kasi kung minsan, halimbawa, nag-decide sila sa infrastructure project, now, matagal ang gestation period niyan. But assuming na kumita sila, ibabalik din yan sa gobyerno. So yung sinasabi mo na matagal yan bumaba doon sa mga nasa ibaba, it will follow the same process. It will follow the same process. Ang issue dyan is governance, especially sa barangay level. At
Hindi,
saka
pero
doon po
yung
sa local
approval
government.
process, mabilis, right? I mean, hindi katulad sa budget ngayon, ang haba talaga ng process. Pero dito, pag in-identify na nila, halimbawa, yung infrastructure project that they will invest in, studying it is just a matter of what? Coming up with a corporate decision among very few board members, right? I mean, so in
But
that sense, it makes it
Lucio,
faster. Yeah.
ang sinasabi nating present setup, meron kang land bank, and they have their own boards. You have a DBP, and they have their own boards.
So,
You have a
isa-isa yun?
BSP.
Each
Malikas na
one of
monetary
them will
board.
have to study it.
Iba-iba naman ang ano yan eh. I mean, they work all at the same time. Hindi yung pag natapos ng land bank, DBP, PNB, BSP, hindi. In other words, the money that is being handled or managed by land bank, that's their own lookout. Sila ang mismo nagde-decide niyan. Hindi pupunta sa budget yan, hindi pupunta sa kongreso yan. Kaya
Yeah,
hindi mo po pwedeng
given.
pagkumparahin yung sa budget at saka yung ginagawa nitong mga sinatawag nilang founder GFI such as Land Bank and DBP.
DBP.
They have their own boards. They
Right.
can decide on their investment and lending policies and practices.
So there's no decided advantage.
Well, yung sinasabi kanina ni Michael, wholesale, no? Na lahat ko consolidate, maybe there is economy of scale. But my point is, okay, you have the economy of scale. The problem is that's another layer, no? There's another layer kasi tatanggalin na ba natin yung DBP at saka yung land bank? They will stay. They will stay. Ang maximum lang na po pwedeng ibigay ng land bank at DBP is 25% of their net worth. Bibigay niya yan sa MIF. So MIF will manage a maximum of 25% of their net worth of land bank and
Yes.
DBP, and then they will manage. But land bank and DBP will stay. Andiyan pa rin sila.
Oo. Yeah.
Sir-
So,
Oh, go ahead.
okay, yeah. Sa worst case scenario, sabi mo kanina, the difference is now there will be convictions, no? May makukulong. Pero may contingent liabilities pa rin ang government. What
That's
would
right.
those be? What would those be? Kasi ang contingent liabilities na yan, taxpayer pa rin ang magbe-bear ng burden yan, di ba?
That's right. Ang sinasabi kong contingent liability, sasabihin kasi natin, pwedeng mangutang pero hindi gagarantyahan ng gobyerno. So sa unang tingin, walang masyadong danger or risk.
Right.
Diba? Dahil walang guarantee eh. Pero kapag ka pumalpak ang MIF, that's part of the contingent liability of the national government.
Becomes
Kasi
part of
gobyerno
the
din
debt
yan eh.
burden. Yes. Okay.
Well, sirs, so ang pinaka-advantage na talaga nito, tama ba, is the economy of scale. In other words, nakakapag-wholesale tayo dahil mas malaki ang pondo, mas maliit relatively yung ating gastos for administration. Did I get
malaki
that right?
rin exposure.
And pangalawa, if we talk about economies of scale, how much are we going to save out of that? Is it worth all the trouble?
So, Mario, ano
I
po
have
kasi
no
to?
idea. I have no
Sir
idea.
Comfort, kayo po.
Ito po kasi, yun, dahil ipopool po yung funds, no? So, parang medyo na-eliminate po yung, tama po yung sabi ni Governor kanina, yung decision-making process. Kumbaga, na-supersede na, o based on the prerogative of, di ba, parang mas unified na kung ano yung ma-set na priority na developmental or infrastructure project. So, nandun yun siguro yung pinaka-value added mo dahil nga na-pool na yung funds. No? Kasi as against dun sa watak-watak o kanya-kanya yung mga GFIs or GOCCs. So yun po yung ano doon, no? Isa sa mga value added noon, no? Kasi matagal na rin po talaga pinopropose yan na dapat talaga yung mga on their own, itong mga i-invite din yung mga GFIs at GOCCs na tumulong din. Kasi ano po ba yung constraints ngayon sa infra? Although may options naman po talaga when it comes to funding pagdating sa mga infrastructure projects. For instance, ito pong isa sa mga latest na disclose, no? Meron pong funding from the government of Japan. 0.1% lang po per year. Ang haba pa po ng payment terms. May grace period pa po yun. So, yun po yung Tapos sige ba, that's bilateral. Meron din po from the multilateral. So, ADB, World Bank Group, no? At the same time, pati yung iba pa pong developmental institutions na nagpo-provide ng funding po when it comes to infra. Tapos, maaaring alternative po ito sa commercial, no? Sa commercial, kasi parang i-exhaust po yung options available. Kung talagang paglalaanan po yung pondo, doon po sa specific na priority infrastructure project, no? So, yun po yung magiging alternative niya. Yung commercial, doon po kasi medyo mahal. Parang pwede naman po hiramin yan sa mga financial institutions, whether locally or from overseas, no? At saka naghihikayat din po yung, kasi balik na naman din yung PPP, mas ini-encourage po yan. Kasi before,
Yes.
mas priority order dahil mas muray niya lang, medyo yung proseso po, it would, marami po requirements, it would take some time. Parang yung speed na maaring ito po yung, if you are to really, may foresight tayo kung how would this evolve, no? Mas mabilis po dapat ito na mas in decision making kasi kung na-identify yung priority, yun nga lang, may ang alternative yan, other than, pag na-exhaust na yung other options na medyo commercial rates na when it comes to the funding cost, no? But yun lang po yung tsaka yung niya, supposedly, yung pagdating sa approval, sa funding, pati yung yung deployment, yung rollout na rin po para doon sa infrastructure projects, mas mabilis. Kasi hinikayat na rin po yung private sector, mapa-local yan or foreign investors, kung allowed yan, no? Under the foreign ownership rules, no? Mas hinikayat na po yung mga ganon, no? Supposedly, mas mabilis po ito, no? Kasi pagka may private partners, minsan, isa rin po yun sa naging constraint in the past, Pagka may private sector participation, pati rin po yung decision making, dadaan din po sa kanila, tapos dadaan din po sa government sector at kailangan pa po i-reconcile yun, no? So, ito, nasa gobyerno na po, pati yung funding supposedly. So, yun na lang po siguro yung pinaka-added value dito. Otherwise, tulad po ng mga binanggit kanina, na para lang to win away, no? To diversify and to differentiate it from the existing processes. Otherwise, kasi yun nga, redundancy po. Natutugunan na po ng ibang ahensya. So, ito na po yung pinaka, dito, to level up yung, niya, when it comes to, yung pinaka-differentiating factor niya as value-added na, that would set it apart. Yun po siguro, when it comes to delivering the results. Pero, and then again, kailangan talaga, yung motivation po dyan, mas mataas po yung kita. Po yung number one.
Ultimately, dapat kumita to.
Pero isang pahabol.
Magdagdag ng 2 points,
sige pa.
Rodi. No? 2 points lang, no? Number one, baka kasi ang tingin ng bawat isa sa atin, o maaari yung mga nakikinig sa atin, ang gobyerno ay matagal magdesisyon, no? Lalong-lalo na pagka gumagawa tayo ng nagpa-funding tayo ng project. Remember, ang magagawa ng MIF ay dalawa, no? O pwedeng mag-invest yan sa financial instruments. So, cash, deposit, bonds, debentures, etc. Madali yan. No? Madali mag-decision dyan. I think even Land Bank and DBP can decide on these things very, very fast. However, kapag tinignan na natin ang funding para doon po sa tinatawag nating infrastructure o kaya water projects, power projects, etc., it will take time.
Exactly.
Remember, meron po tayong PPP Institute, yung pong public-private partnership. Ang ginagawa lang po niyan, tingnan ang viability, physical viability, financial viability, etc., etc. It takes years. At hindi lamang po ito unique sa Pilipinas, no? Kahit po sa ibang bansa, it takes years before a project is approved for possible funding by government. Yan po ang given, ano? Now, doon po sa nakalagay dito sa batas na ito, no? Yung magiging batas na ito, nakalagay din po diyan yung mga ibang mga infrastructure project ay yung i-clear ng NEDA, National Economic and Development Authority.
So, ganun na
you go
ganun.
back to
Pareho
government.
rin, no? It's almost the
You
same
go back to
then.
government. So what's the
Yes.
difference?
Yeah. Sir, we're out of time, but just one very basic question on that point, because yun din yung tanong ko eh. Kasi every time we talk to private sector analysts and investors here, simple lang yung tanong nila. Sabi na, if you want us to invest, tell us, ano ba yung i-investa namin? Diba? Saan ba kami pumapusta? And therefore, we can start planning out, ano ba yung returns dito, ano yung impact. Pero kung matatagalan lang din, and I guess my question is, when we open this investment fund and we say, oh, who wants to bet on the Philippines? Is there a potential here for us, at least initially, na looking not so stellar?
Well, I will answer that, Robin. No? Merong ginawa itong si Romy Bernardo ng Global Source. Okay? He used to be Undersecretary of Finance. Pero siyang sinabi doon, na nung tinitingnan nila yung infrastructure flagship project ng current administration, parang sinasabi niya, parang ito din yung doon sa kay Duterte. Because it takes years, no? It takes years. What we really need to do is really to do harder and smarter work in pinpointing the most viable projects. I'll tell you a story, no? Several years ago, ang Secretary of Finance pa, itong si Secretary Gary Tedes, we went to London, no? Together with the ASEAN finance ministers and central bank governors. No? Tapos, mayroong magpipresent yung mga ASEAN finance ministers at ini-invite lahat ng mga multinational companies doon na mag-invest sa ASEAN. Okay? Pagkatapos noon, may breakout session. So, nagpunta na kami sa Pilipinas, no? Sa Philippine breakout room. Siguro there were about 10 or 15, no? After that, lumabas na kami kasi tapos na we were able to service all of their questions, etc.
Yeah.
Punta kami dun sa Vietnam. Sa Vietnam breakout room, punong-puno SRO, standing room only. Why? Because yung kanilang trade minister, yung kanilang tourism minister, etc. will tell you 1, 2, 3, 4 lahat ng projects na available kung saan, okay? At nakalagay doon yung timeline. Pag pumasok ko ngayon, in 2 weeks you will have the permit, in 3 weeks, etc., etc. In other words, kuha na lang lahat sa'yo, ibibigay sa'yo, pati kung sino mga tao ang dapat mong kontakin. That is what will attract investment into the Philippines.
Yeah.
That is what will make investment worthwhile in the Philippines. Not to have, not necessarily having or establishing an investment fund like the MIF.
We're back to ease of doing business.
To do the usual government responsibility of making sure that it is ready and ready for funding. Yun po.
Okay. Former Deputy Governor of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas, Diwa Gunigundo, and Chief Economist of RCBC, Michael Ricafort. Sir, maraming salamat po sa inyo.
Thank you,
Thank you,
sirs.
Thank you.
Maraming po salamat at magandang gabi rin.
That is all we have for the Chiefs. Ako po si Robbie Alampay.
We hope what was discussed here will keep the conversation going. I'm Lucy Cruz Valdez, News 5.
I'm Ed Lingao. We are One News, all sides, all the time.